great King of the universe, the one who created you, ma'am, the one who gave you ground to walk on. What an amazing demonstration of grace that God has not caused the ground to swallow you up. That God hasn't caused the sorrow to come and crush your head. What a gracious God. What a merciful God, ma'am. What a patient God. Decades of your life in rebellion against God, crying out against God, hating God, despising God, decades and decades and decades. So what will you do on the day of judgment? On the day of judgment, when all of this, you'll realize life's not a joke. Life's not a game. Every breath you take, you're closer to your last breath. Every breath you suck in mercy. You don't deserve life. Decades and decades and decades in rebellion against God, and rebellion against your Maker, and rebellion against the one who gave you a brain, a tongue, a mouth, the things you use against him, the things you use as artillery and arrows to shoot against God, and yet the Bible says that God has his arrow drawn now. He has his arrow drawn, and he will not relent towards his enemy. Have mercy on this lady. Oh God, what a gracious God, that he would cause the gospel to come to Santa Fe, this place of idolatry and wickedness, hearts as hard as a stone, people that don't want to hear about God, people that have no desire for God. She's right here. Have mercy on her, oh God. Bless you, man. Bless you. Bless you, man. Cry out to God to have mercy on you. Cry out to God today. And yet God has been gracious. God has sent a messenger. He has messengers in the crowd today. God has his people proclaiming not Buddha, not Muhammad, not Hare Krishna, not Roman Catholicism, not the Navajo tradition, but Jesus Christ, the only way to God, the only one mighty enough to save sinners from the wrath of God, from the right and just righteousness of God, from the good judgment of God. God does not destroy sinners in hell because he's monstrous, because he's a tyrant. God did not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because God was wicked or monstrous or cruel or unloving, but God destroyed sinners in hell. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because they were rebellious against God. What a gracious God that he hasn't destroyed Santa Fe yet. What a gracious God that he hasn't destroyed you yet. Decades after decades, ma'am, in rejection of God, rebellion against God, shaking their heads like when Christ was on the cross. And they would shake their heads, they would wag their heads, and they would point at Christ. And they said, this is the man who said he was the Son of God. This is the man who said that if they destroy the temple, he'll rebuild it in 3 days. This is the one who said he's the Messiah, the one who's come to save sinners from the wrath of God. The Lamb come to take away the sins of the world. They pointed at Christ, they wagged their heads and they shook their heads, and they said, tell us, Christ, if you're the Son of God, jump off the cross. They blindfolded Christ. If you're the Messiah, if you're a prophet, tell us who just hit you. Tell us who just spat on you. Tell us who just scourged you. If you're the Son of God, why are you hanging on a tree? Why are you hanging on a cross? How can you explain that the author of life comes to earth and he lives for 33 years and he goes to a cross and he dies? Explain that. The one who created time steps into time. The one who created the universe steps into his own universe. And he does it not to save righteous people, not to save those who think they're good, people that think they're too good for heaven, people who think they deserve God, that they don't need to hear about God, not to save those people, but to save those people who know they're sinners. What's up? What's up?
Thank you. We were dancing for God, you're talking for God.
Right, man, yeah. All right, brother. Thank you, man. But to save the unrighteous, to save the unworthy, to save those who know they're sinners who know they've never loved God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And as always, the Bible shows that every time God appears to man, every time God appears to woman, man and woman fall on their face before God and they worship. They fall on their face because they realize that God is holy and God is pure and God is righteous and God can by no means and will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. God has spoken and said that the soul who sins shall die. And every time God appears to man, they realize that God is this same God. God in his power, God in his beauty, God in his majesty, God in his righteousness, God who, in front of whom the entire host of heaven bows down before. The angels bow down before this God. The angels cover their faces and cover their feet and cry out, holy, holy, holy. Day and night, holy, holy, holy. There's something about God that when you get into his presence, you can't help but to boast about his goodness. You can't help but to boast about his compassion and about his mercy. But there's only one way to that God, because there's only one salvation. There's only one who came to take upon the sins of his people. Every sin that you've committed, from the time you were born, from the days that you used to rebel against your parents, the days you used to steal things, maybe even this day, when you lied, when you stole, looked at ladies, looked at guys with lust, every time you broke the law of God, every time you kicked against the throne of God, God will not be mocked. God will not be mocked.